Hello everyone and welcome to the other game I said we'd cover from the Superbet Chess Classic Round 3. It's Fabiano Caruana versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and unlike the previous game that we've covered, Ding versus Yanni Pomnishi, this one is nothing like that. This one is a miniature, 23 moves, and well, it's not something you would expect out of a classical game, but still very, very exciting stuff, so let's check it out. Fabiano Caruana has the white pieces and he opens with pawn to d4, and the Maxime, as he usually does, goes for either some sort of a King's Indian or maybe a Grunfeld or even a Benoni, all depending on what Fabi plays. So here pawn to c4, g6, and Fabi strikes very early on with pawn to h4. Now this is not a move you would expect, and Maxime has seen it before, but he had some the different experiences with it. Against some people he played well. For example, against Magnus Carlsen, Magnus also played this against Maxime. He lost terribly in the St. Louis Blitz tournament in 2019. So, it definitely brings back memories. So here, bishop to g7, knight to c3, and in that game against Magnus Carlsen, Maxime continued with c5. Here he goes for castles, and now pawn to e4. So just a standard King's Indian defense. We have d6, bishop to e2, and now pawn to c5. We have d5, and now, while you could play e6, for example, Alexander Grishuk, as he's also a big fan of this pawn to h4 move, played this against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave in the Grandchester Paris Rapid tournament also of 2019. But here, Maxime goes for pawn to b5. He switches it from a King's Indian to sort of a Benoni type setup or a Benko type setup with white having h4 on the board. And in the interview after the game, Fabi said that, okay, I mean, maybe perhaps even the best you could play against this setup is the Benoni, because everyone knows that the h4 move is a move you don't play against the Benoni or against the Benko. It's just useless. But on the other hand, you're still playing the Benoni or the Benko. So here we have c captures on b5, a6, and now pawn to a4. A captures on b5, bishop captures on b5, and now bishop to a6. And here, there even is a game where Maxime Vachier-Lagrave had this exact same position, but with the white pieces. He had it against Peter Svidler, and he won a very nice game. The game continued with bishop to d2. But here we have bishop captures on a6, and it is now, as of move 11, that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Fabi deals with this setup with the h4 move on the board. Knight captures on a6 is played, and now knight to f3. And here, queen to d7 by MVL, preparing to bring the other rook into the game, but also eyeing that g4 square. Now, in all sorts of well, positions that could arise from a Benko, this c4 move is something that you should always consider. I've played it in many positions, and it kind of always works out well, because you just give your knight to this c5 square, and from c5 the knight can come to b3, the knight can come to d3, and especially if there's no light square bishop, if it's very hard to contest the pawn. Sure, at some point white can go knight to d2, and it might become a little bit weak, but it can be done. So let's say even bishop to e3, you're going to play knight to b4, and now if white castles, you will put the knight on d3. Now this is not as scary as it looks. White actually can allow this, and the game might continue even with something like knight to e1. The b2 pawn is pretty much always given. The black knight captures on b2. Let's say queen c2, knight to d3, and now you trade captures, captures, and captures, and now you, let's say, go knight to g4, and this is something that could come up. The dark square bishop being pressured, this bishop coming fully alive on this diagonal, and it's not easy for white to make a move. For example, if you play something like bishop to d4, which definitely makes sense, this is met with pawn to e5, and it's not easy to play this with white. If anything, black will be even better here. So here, white should go back with something like bishop g5 or bishop to d2, and then the game continues. But Maxime decides to go for queen to d7, and now we have castles by Fabi, and now queen to g4. And Fabi said that he really liked this g4 move. He thought it was a very strong idea. Because how do you play this? Obviously, the e4 pawn is hanging, so you have to either defend it or advance it. Now, he could advance it, let's say, captures and captures, and give up the h4 pawn. And now, what do you make of this position? You have a beautiful knight on e5. The d pawn might become strong. Okay, you do have a passed a pawn, but it's not really going anywhere. So it's it's a nice position. Queen can come to f3, rook can come to e1, the pawn will come to a5. So you can definitely play it. But he decided not to rush anything, just rook to e1, and now knight to b4. now the knight at some point can come to d3, maybe c4 and the d3, or maybe even this knight comes to h5 to f4 and then to d3. So these are all possibilities. So bishop to g5 by Fabi, and here he thought that Maxime had to play something like rook f to d8 and then kick away the bishop, and then they play a game like this. But the move that Maxime played after bishop to g5 completely took Fabi by surprise. He played knight to h5, giving up the e7 pawn, and this is I mean, this is incredibly scary. This is the base of the pawn chain. If e7 falls, then d6 is weak, then c5 is weak, and you have to have incredible compensation for this. And Maxime is looking for compensation in the sense that if knight comes to f4, he will have some checkmating pressure on g2. Also, the other knight might come to d3. The f4 knight will defend it, so there could be something there. So let's see it. Bishop captures on e7. Fabi does not believe that this is possible. Knight to f4, and now you have to defend checkmate. The only way to do that is to play pawn to g3, and now rook f to e8. The problem is with a move like knight b to d3, let's say, it looks really strong. The problem is a knight to g5. This is what Fabi found, offering a queen trade, and now you have to trade queens. There's no way to go about it other than trading. And even if you give up the b2 pawn, we already said that in most of these lines you will have to give up the pawn, and now even bishop captures on f8 wins the exchange, because if you try to take the rook, then look at this, bishop captures on g7, and after you capture on c3, the bishop also gobbles up the knight, and now you're up a full bishop. So that's the problem. So here rook f to e8, and Fabi says, all right, show me. Bishop captures on d6. I'm grabbing that one as well. And now I have a past d pawn, past a pawn. Where is your compensation? And the problem is Maxime doesn't have, again, he doesn't have knight b to d3. Because Fabi would just trade, captures, you play e5, and there's no move for black. The position is just silly. So instead, we have knight f to d3, now attacking the rook and going after the b2 pawn, and Fabi just plays rook to e3. Now even putting pressure on the knight, so you can't even keep the knight there. So knight captures on b2, we have queen to b3, stopping the knight from coming to c4, so you have to go back to d3, and now just pawn to e5, closing this diagonal, and again asking Maxime, where is your counterplay? Maxime plays pawn to f5, he wants to play something, he has to create something, but Fabi just plays knight to h2, attacks the queen, and now you have to play queen to d4 and hope for the best, even though even that is a terrible position for black. But Maxime played queen to h3, he really wants to play that pawn to f4 move in, but Fabi just played knight to e2, and he was in this position on move 23 that Maxime Vachier-Lagrave resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The problem is there's no defense against, there's no move for black. Whatever you play doesn't really work. If you try capturing a pawn, let's say bishop captures on e5, you just trade everything. Bishop captures, knight captures, and even rook captures, because after rook captures there's knight f4 and the queen is trapped. So there's no getting out of that. And even if you try something after this knight to e2 move, even if you try pawn to f4, which okay, maybe does open up this diagonal so you can run away with the queen. Still, just knight captures on f4, and after knight captures on f4, g captures on f4, there's nothing for you here. Now the pawn center is even more massive. The queen is attacked, the queen has to go back. You just, continue the game, and the black has zero counterplay here. Of course, Maxime knows this, as he's an expert in positions like these, so he just resigned here. Very nicely done. You can see a totally different spirit of the game and totally different concept than what we've seen in Ding versus Nepo. Ding versus Nepo are still brawling it out as if they were still playing the World Chess Championship match, and here we just have a classical game miniature of 23 moves where Fabi completely crushes Maxime with pawn to h4. It's a move that has been making a sort of a re-emergence. It's been popular in the 90s. It's been popular 20 years ago. It's been popular 10 years ago. It's coming back now. The strong grandmasters are starting to play it. But like Fabi said, in his opinion, it is definitely Alexander Grishuk who is to blame for this increased popularity of h4 in this position and in many other positions. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for suggesting such a nice game. Fabi improving his rating a little bit, but also his standings in the tournament. It's now like a 5-man tie, so we're not going to discuss the standings. So once we have a sort of an imbalance, then we're going to show the standings and discuss it a little bit. Until then, we're just enjoying the games, enjoying the tournament, and we'll see what happens in round 4. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Edmund Freeman, Evan Bursey, Ravishing Reptiles YouTube, Lord of Bones, and Mazin El Sarag for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this wonderful event until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And sorry about the weird audio quality for the first minute of the previous video. I never change anything in my setup. It's just that sometimes, you know, the audio becomes weird. I have no idea why that happens. So really sorry about that. See you soon.